Hey everybody, this is Dan Kennedy for Custom Trends. My first time doing this, so bear with me. And today you're here with one of my heroes. Oh boy, I can't believe we're doing this. I have known this guy since I was 15 years old. Yes, and I still can't believe somebody pinched me here. And Laurence Juber, wow, guitarist virtuoso, guitarist of the year. Wings. He's done everything here. And like I said, we first met at Beatle Fest whatever years ago. Met you and Hope for the first time then. And like I said, so Lawrence, Larry, what does everybody call you?
No, never Larry. Larry goes straight over my head. No, it's Lawrence or LJ.
Okay, LJ.
My family, when I was growing up, my family called me Lol. LOL, lol. But of course that means something different now in texting. So yeah, LJ or Lawrence is fine. But Larry nobody ever called me Larry.
Well, you're British. I guess that's why.
Yeah.
Are you still British? Are you a citizen now?
I've been a U.S. citizen since 1988. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, Lawrence, tell me, like I said, when I first met you, when we talked for about a minute, I always wanted to ask you, how did you get started in music? I mean, you've been doing this since you were born, pretty much.
Almost. 1963 was a very important year in England because unlike America where you had like the one moment on Ed Sullivan where 73 million people were tuned in England that whole year was really a wave of Beatlemania.
Yeah, you started growing, you know.
And it was really, I think, I was aware of the Beatles. I mean, Please Please Me was early in the year, then From Me to You. In July 28th or 29th, I think it was 1963, my dad and my brother and I went to see Jerry and the Pacemakers and Billy J. Kramer and the Dakota.
I met him.
And that was my first concert. Since then, I've actually recorded with Billy J. Kramer, played with him, and co-produced his new album, which will be out in a couple of months.
Nice.
But that, kind of completes the circle. But then in August, She Loves You came out, which made a big impression because that was on my summer holidays, and what you're listening to when you're 10 years old is important, And then I wanted to play guitar, and my dad wanted me to play the saxophone because he was a big band fan. So I said, okay, I'm starting a new school. I'll apply to learn clarinet to be in the orchestra.
I know the feeling.
And I made sure my name was at the bottom of the list.
Smart.
So they ran out of clarinets before they got to me. And a few weeks later, when the Beatles did the Royal Command performance, where John makes the wisecrack about rattling the jewelry. I think that gave the guitar the kind of legitimacy that my parents felt, well, maybe it's not a hooligan instrument after all. And so for my 11th birthday in November of 63, I got a guitar, and 60 years later, I've never put it down. And of course, a week later, With the Beatles is released, I Want to Hold Your Hand is released. And then it just, it was really not just the Beatles. I mean, it was the Stones, the Animals, the Kinks.
The British invasion.
Well, except we weren't invaded. That was all. That was all homegrown. Yeah. So
you invaded us.
And it was like every week, every Thursday, Melody Maker was a music newspaper, New Musical Express disc. There were like multiple sources of information on music, even though the BBC radio was very limited in what it would play. But on Saturday mornings, you could tune into a show called Saturday Club on the BBC, and you'd hear the Beatles having recorded, in the BBC studios. Yeah. So stuff, the first time I ever heard Johnny Be Good was the Beatles doing it on Saturday Club, which of course they never recorded on one of their albums, but I always associated it with them because that was the first time I heard it.
I have the BBC disc at home. So.
But that was, if you could imagine being 11 years old, and hearing that when it was actually, broadcast for the first time, it's the kind of thing that makes a big impression. And of course, when you're that age, you can kind of daydream about, well, wouldn't it be cool to play with the Beatles, And as it turned out, I got to play with 3 out of 4 of them. So ambition, 3/4 fulfilled.
Well, the closest I ever think was just meeting the family. I met Michael McCartney, and I met Miss Boyd. I can't think of her first name; it escapes me.
Patty?
Patty Boyd,
Yeah.
and I met Julia Lennon. So that's the closest thing I ever been to. Oh, and I met Julian Lennon a couple of times. So that's my closest thing I've got. Now you.
It's kind of Beatles adjacent.
Yeah. So you mentioned playing with during the Paceburger stuff. So you played pretty much with a lot of one of the biggest session musicians out there. I mean, everybody wanted you because.
Well, I was a very active studio musician in London in the mid-'70s because as a teenager, I realized that was what I wanted to do. I mean, I was playing in top 40 bands, doing my homework on the band bus, coming back, at 3 o'clock in the morning with school the next day. But I think that it was really the idea that I could become a successful musician and make a living as a musician, and kind of the brass ring, the thing to really reach for was to be a studio musician, because that way I loved records. I loved the sound of recorded music, so I could play on records, and that became my ambition. And I went to London University and studied music. I never really studied much formal guitar. I had some classical guitar lessons when I was in high school, but I was mostly self-taught on guitar. Where I had my education was in music itself. And I played with the National Youth Jazz Orchestra, which helped get me into studio work.
Good.
And then when I left college, I almost immediately went into full-time studio work. And I did that from 1975 until 78 when I got asked to join Wings.
Let's talk about that a minute. So did Paul McCartney know about you? Did you work some studio sessions for him and he said, hey, we need a new guitarist. Let's get Laurence.
I didn't work any studio sessions for him, although I did meet him at a studio in North London.
In passing.
Just in passing, because I was working on a session with a bass player named Herbie Flowers, great English bass player, played on a lot of things, and was a friend of Paul's. And we were on a break and went to the men's room, and walked in, and there's Paul McCartney zipping up his fly. and so I got to meet him in a very inauspicious way. And then in September of 77, I was working in the house band on a TV show with an artist named David Essex.
Heard of him?
David Essex, big pop star. Rock On he had a big hit with that back in the 70s. And big pop star in England. And each week on the show, they would have a different musical guest. And one week was Ronnie Spector. Oh. Another week was Twiggy.
Cool.
Who was just starting a stage career, doing musicals. And Denny Lane was a guest, and we did Go Now, and Denny liked my playing and recommended me to Paul and Linda. But that wasn't like an instant thing. I mean, that happened in September. I got the call to audition in April the following year. So it wasn't like it happened overnight. But it was having worked with Denny that really got me the gig.
Let's talk a little about Denny. Of course, everybody knows we lost him last year, and I had the privilege of knowing him for a couple of years, meeting him on occasion here and there. I actually interviewed him one time, which is a big thrill for me. And when was the last time you taught? And did you know he was sick?
I did know he was sick because I was in communication with him and his wife, Liz. And I was involved in a benefit concert we did here in LA shortly before he passed away also.
Really?
We did a concert at the Troubadour. And Peter Asher played, Mickey Dolenz played. It was quite a big night. And
I didn't hear about it. If I knew, I would have gone there.
Well, it was they did stream it. I know they recently did a tribute to him in Liverpool too. But Denny, I mean, it happened pretty quickly where he was in the hospital and we knew that he had been having issues, and then he was back at home, and then it just kind of got
Also,
worse.
tell me, like I said, the first time I met you was at thing called Beatle Fest some years ago. That's the first time I also met you, your wife Hope. And you got on stage and you told me, "Hey, anybody see the Brady Bunch?" And that's yes, I saw it. So well, if you watch this one episode, that's my wife. And
Actually, she was on 4 episodes.
yeah, yeah.
But she played Greg's girlfriend on the show.
And everybody knows she's the girl with a frog on her head.
Frog on her head. She also was the one that was uninvited to Marsha's slumber party too.
I gotta rewatch that one.
We showed that to our grandkids a couple of weeks ago.
Too much. Yeah, your daughters are also in music, aren't they?
They are, yeah. My daughter Ilse is a songwriter, recording artist. She has an album on Elektra Records here in the U.S. In England, she's on Parlophone, which of course was the Beatles record label.
Oh,
so, yeah.
Lucky.
And she's written hits for all kinds of people. She wrote Panic at the Disco's High Hopes, Mercy for Shawn Mendes. Yeah, Nothing Breaks Like a Heart for Miley Cyrus. Going back, the first hit she had was Fireball for Pitbull.
Oh my God!
Yeah. No, if you look her up, Ilse, I-L-S-E-Y.
Is she here?
No, she's not here. No, she doesn't live here. And then Nico, our elder daughter, was she had a off-Broadway musical that played last spring in New York called Millennials Are Killing Musicals. And she's progressing with that. She's anticipating that she can get a New York production of it. So, doing a musical is a lengthy process. Nothing happens overnight with that.
And I mean, a few people are trying to do that stuff still.
Yeah.
So we mentioned Hope for a little while. Do people know who her father was? I mean, the family you married into?
Yeah, I married into just this weird nexus of pop culture because her dad was Sherwood Schwartz, who created Gilligan's Island and the Brady Bunch. And, so I'm coming, from Wings, so it's like British Invasion meets American situation comedy. And, we worked together a great deal.
You did the soundtrack for a couple of the Brady Bunch movies. You did that.
I did the Christmas movie. And then this is my latest album.
A Day in My Life.
A Day in My Life, which was recorded at Abbey Road Studios with Hope producing.
Whoa.
Which is a dozen of my my Beatle arrangements and just the opportunity to record in that actual studio, in Studio 2.
A lot of history there.
Pretty magical, yeah. And I had worked there. I mean, in fact, I was working there when I got the call to audition for Wings.
Oh.
Yeah, it was not it was not a foreign place for me. I mean, the first time I worked there was for a recording session with an orchestra and some mandolins and a harpsichord player, and nobody knew what it was for. And then 25 years later, I read in a magazine when they were interviewing Alan Parsons, and he said, "Well, we had Laurence Juber play guitar." We did. It was Tales of Mystery and Imagination, but everybody that worked on it didn't know it was a secret. It was all a secret thing until it got released, and I had no idea what it was. So I'd been used to working at Abbey Road, but to go back there after 40-something years. Was pretty amazing because the room hasn't changed. The control room has changed, but the studio itself is functionally the same as it was when the Beatles.
The same colors or something.
Yeah, and the and the microphones. I mean, I'm playing into microphones that were used on Beatle records.
Oh my God! Yeah. Speaking of that, did you see there's been a lot of Beatles new stuff on the Beatles.
There's always new
Then
stuff
and
on
Now.
Beatles, yeah.
The movie Get Back.
Right.
Did you see that?
Oh yeah.
I only saw
twice.
I only saw the first part. I haven't seen part 2 or 3 yet.
You have to see the whole thing.
I gotta see it. Yeah. I know. I got so busy.
I mean, there's a whole story arc to it, really. But it does give you an idea of the way that Paul works, because people got the impression from the Let It Be movie that Paul was kind of bossy. But when you see him in context, you have to understand that he is a musical director, that he has a musical imagination, and he hears what he wants to be on the how magical that is. And there was always, in working with him, there was always something that would be something that you wouldn't expect. For example, we recorded a song called Spin It On.
I heard that.
on Back to the Egg, which was a very, kind of punk rockabilly kind of thing. And when it came to doing the guitar solo on it, I was sitting in the control room of the studio up in Scotland, which wasn't really a studio. It was actually a barn on the farm. But I was sitting where you are, and Paul was here, and I'm playing guitar and eyeball to eyeball, and just him bringing stuff out of me that I didn't know I could do. Because that's what a good producer does, is to take the artist up to a different level. Which is why I like working with Hope, because that's what she does with me, is to push me to a different level in what I'm doing. And Paul is very, very good at that kind of thing.
When's the last time you saw Paul?
A couple of years ago.
Oh, I thought that's I know he spends a lot of time in America because his wife's American, so.
Oh yeah, well, he spends time in L.A. He spends time in New York, but everybody's busy.
Any chance you might do? Did they ever call you? Hey, I'm in town. Let's do this together.
No, it doesn't work that way. No, because he's had the same band forever.
Never, I know. I've seen him in concert quite a few
and
times.
a lot of the time when he's recording, he doesn't always use other musicians either. You look at, the McCartney 1, 2, and 3
He's everything.
albums, and that's him.
I know.
Because he can play drums, he can play keyboards, he plays bass, he plays guitar.
I got the albums.
Yeah, he does all that.
He's everything.
Yeah.
I like him when he does the talk show and everything like that, Jimmy Fallon and everything. That's fun too. Well, I gotta say, this has been a brilliant thing for me too. Do you ever do any teaching or anything?
I do a little bit of teaching. There's some workshops that I get involved in. I'm doing one in Alaska in August.
Oh, you're going to Alaska?
Yeah, I've done it a couple of times. It's kind of fun, actually, to do those things, because you get to hang out with a bunch of other musicians, and people seem to like the way that I communicate my musical ideas. But the teaching that I'm more involved in on a pro bono basis right now is with the Los Angeles School District. I'm helping to develop some curriculum for them on the history of the guitar, the history of rock and roll, and some very basic musical guitar stuff. My philosophy is that it's the kind of, you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. You teach him how to fish, and he eats for life. It's like I like to be able to give the information to help students find their own way, as opposed to simply saying, okay, play this chord. What I'd rather do and say, okay, well, see this string, this is a G string, and now that chord that's built on that, if you play the second string and the third string together, now you have a G and a B, which is a major third, and that's the core of a G chord. And here's the cowboy version of a G chord. But that might be too much of a stretch for young fingers, so here's a simpler version of it.
I gotta try myself.
It's stuff like that because for me, I consider myself a musician who plays guitar, even though guitar is my passion, and I have. I've really kind of dug deep into the instrument. It all is informed by my understanding of music. And so understanding music is a key to really appreciating it, being able to work with it. But, it's crazy. Nowadays, my grandkids have songs on Spotify.
Oh.
It used to be when I was that age, when I was 10 years old, I'd wash my neighbor's car to make some money. And then when I was a little older, I could babysit. Now it's like, okay, well, how much did you make on Spotify this month? Well, I
I'll never forget it. So, and are you going to be performing anywhere in LA soon or something? Or just go to your site and find out?
If you go to my website, there are some local things happening. There's an artist named T-Bear, who's an old friend of mine that I just co-produced his album that comes out March 22nd. In fact, the first single's already out, which I co-wrote with him.
T-Bear. I'll look into that.
T-Bear. It's a song called A Change Will Do Me Good, and there's a video on YouTube. It's on Quarto Valley Records, which is his record company. That's the one that put out the Edgar Winter, My Brother Johnny, that won the Blues Grammy last year. So we're playing April 5th. We're playing at the Write-Off Room here in Studio City for the kind of the launch party of that album.
I'll try and come to that.
But he's been on the road with a blues guitarist named Walter Trout. So we haven't been doing very many shows. I'm playing McCabe's in May with a good friend of mine, Peppino D'Agostino, who's a wonderful Italian fingerstyle guitarist. And sometimes we tag team. We do a double headers because he's up in the Bay Area, so I'll go up there and do something with him, and he'll come down here. There's a community of solo guitar players who like to work together too. But you just check my website because there's all kinds of stuff going on. In fact, the one thing that just came up, which is not confirmed yet, is because this year is the 45th anniversary of the release of Back to the Egg. There's a guy named Chris Paul Overall who he does a Beatles versus the Stones kind of tribute thing.
I think I've seen that.
But he also has Maybe I'm Amazed, which is a Wings tribute.
Well, LJ, I gotta say this has been a big thrill for me, a big pleasure. I'm sure the fans are enjoying this. So good. So guys,
Thank you.
So LJ, Laurence Juber, guitarist virtuoso. Check the site out. Oh, wait, what's the name of your site?
LaurenceJuber.com. LaurenceJuber.com. If you spell it with a W, you'll still get there. And I am on Facebook. I have an artist page. I occasionally do live streams, what I call Tea Time with LJ. I did that all through lockdown with COVID, and I like to be able to do that. Occasionally I do a concert on Bandcamp too, but Facebook is the one that seems to reach the most people.
That's where I found you.
Yeah. And other than that, I'm just, I'm here in my studio making music, making records. And there is the Billy J. Kramer album that's going to be coming out sometime in the next few months that I co-produced, which we recorded at Abbey Road also.
Yeah. Nice little studio.
Yeah, and, I make music. That's what I do.
And you're very good at it. Thank you very much.